We are up to chapter 6, Mishnah number 7 in Pirkei Avos. This is the first Mishnah in a while that's not related to the 48 ways to wisdom. I looked back in the archive and I discovered that we started chapter 6, Mishnah number 6 in May of 2022. So it's been a while. We spent more than 2 years in chapter 6, Mishnah number 6, going through the 48 ways to wisdom, painstakingly, very carefully, going through it one at a time. Hopefully we learned some of the tools that are needed to acquire Torah. But now we are up to chapter 6, Mishnah number 7. And the subject matter is still Torah study, because the entire subject matter of this chapter, of all of chapter 6 of Pirkei Avos, of Ethics of the Fathers, it all deals with Torah study. And the topic is one particular aspect of Torah study, that it has the capacity to give life. If someone studies Torah, they will be a recipient of life. Not just life in this world, but life in the world to come. Historically, our people have had an absolute love affair with Torah. It's an obsession. It's a dedication. Our people have been devoted with obsessive devotion to Torah study. We've been the people of the book ever since we were founded. We've had universal or near universal literacy for as long as history records. And what our people are here to do, what our national mission, our national ID, it's all about Torah study. And if you understand some of the reasons why, like why are we so obsessed with this? You read chapter 6 of Pirkei Avos, it's all about Torah study, and you get a sense as to why our people are so enamored, fascinated, infatuated, and obsessed with Torah study. And in our Mishnah, we read yet another reason, Gedola Torah, Torah is great, Sheino Senas Chaim, because it gives Chaim, it gives life, Le'oseha, to those who do it, Ba'olam hazeh, u'ba'olam haba, in this world and in the world to come. The Mishnah tells us that Torah gives life to those who do it, both in this world and in the world to come. What do we want more than anything else? What do we cherish more than anything else? What do we try to defend tenaciously more than anything else? It's life. We all want life. And here the Mishnah is telling us that Torah, that gives us life, both in this world and in the world to come. And the Mishnah proceeds by offering us lots and lots of scriptural proof to this. In fact, 9 different verses to support this claim that Torah gives life in this world and in the world to come. All the verses you will learn are from the book of Proverbs, from the book of Mishlei, and it starts off, Ki chaim heim l'motzeim, Torah gives life to those who find it, u'lechol besoro marpeh, and to all its flesh it provides healing. The next verse, this is from chapter 3 of Proverbs. It's a cure for your navel and marrow for your bones. Torah gives you health and vitality. Eitz chaim hi l'machazikim ba. Another verse in Proverbs. Torah is a tree of life for those who hold on to it, for those who cling to it. V'somcheha me'ushar, and those who support it are pleased. Which parenthetically, if you look at this verse, talks about those who support Torah, who study Torah, who cling to Torah, who hold on desperately to Torah. And it differentiates between those who machazikim ba, who hold on to Torah, versus those who support Torah. Now the verse says, Eitz chaim hi l'machazikim ba. For those who hold on to it, who cling to it, it's a tree of life. V'somcheha, those who support it, me'ushar, they are pleased. There's 2 ways to relate to Torah. You could hold on to it very tight, or you could support it. What's the difference between holding on to it very tightly and supporting it? If you're holding onto it very tightly for dear life, it's because you realize that it gives you life. And when you realize the Torah gives you life, and you're holding onto it desperately, then it is a tree of life. But if you support it, if you assume that it needs your support, and you're fine on your own, but I want to give some support to Torah. Of course, very important to support Torah. And you'll be pleased, the verse tells us. You'll be pleased. It's a good thing. But it will not serve as a tree of life. The sages tell us, Torah, that's our national mission. And we have to do whatever we can to support it. But even when we support it, we have to realize that it's supporting us much more than we are supporting it. If we think we're supporting it, then our level of benefit will only be that our level of benefit will only be that we will be pleased, not that it will serve as a tree of life for us. That is the third verse cited in this Mishnah. And then a fourth verse. For they are a graceful wreath upon your head, a necklace about your throat. Talking about the words of Torah, it's a wreath of grace upon your head. It's a necklace for your throat. A very similar verse follows. Torah will adorn your head like a graceful wreath. It will crown you with a glorious diadem, with a crown. Another verse. Ki bi yirbu yamecha, this will increase your days and will add to your years of life. Yet another verse. Long days are to its right, and to its left, wealth and honor. Again, talking about how Torah gives long days to its right. Ki orech yamim, it provides long days, ushnos chaim, and years of life. Vishalom, and peace. Yosifulach, it will add all these things, long days, years of life, and peace. And finally, the final verse that it cites, dirachea darchei noam, the ways of the Torah are ways of pleasantness, v'chol nesivoseha shalom, and all its pathways are peaceful. The Mishnah tells us Torah provides life in two worlds, in this world and in the world to come, and that's why it's so wonderful. Another reason why it's so wonderful, it gives life to those who do it in two worlds, and then it cites 9 verses to prove it, to support it, 9 verses from Proverbs. What does it mean that Torah gives life? And it gives life in two worlds, in this world and in the next world. What does it mean that it gives life in this world? And what does it mean that it gives life in the next world? And of course, the major question that we all have to ask, based upon our definition of life, maybe a legal definition of life, you would say if there's a heartbeat, then that's life. I guess maybe this is a debate. This is maybe a political debate or religious debate, but we have some sort of definition of life. Maybe it's brain activity, maybe it's breathing, maybe it's a heartbeat, maybe it's the ability to live, to be dynamic, to walk around. Everyone has some sort of definition of life. And then when someone's life is over, maybe they'll live 100 years or 150 years or 70 years, and then they die. Well, they're no longer alive. On a simple level, you read this Mishnah, it tells us, well, Torah gives life in this world and in the next world. Does this mean that someone who has Torah is going to invariably have a longer lifespan? Does that actually check out? What's the life expectancy of people who are studying Torah versus people who are not studying it? Has anyone ever done that research to find out if this actually is true based upon that definition of life? Aren't there ignoramuses who live very, very long lives? And don't we know about many great Torah sages who died young? The Arizal, he wasn't 40 when he passed away. The Ramchal wasn't 40 when he passed away. The Orach Chaim wasn't 40 when he passed away. We have many sages that passed away relatively young. How can it be? The Mishnah tells us Torah gives life in this world also. So we have to maybe offer a variety of other interpretations as to what exactly does the Mishnah mean when it says that it gives us life in this world and in the world to come. And as always, the different explanations that the commentators offer, they're not mutually exclusive, they're different angles, but they all have something to base it upon. It's all reputable sources and true ideas. I want to suggest on a very basic level that what the Mishnah means is literal by our definition of life. Heartbeat, brain matter, brain activity, that you're breathing, that you're walking around, you're alive. There's no certificate of death. If someone is connected to Torah, they are immortal. We're told that for someone to die, the angel of death has to come scoop them up. I want to make the claim, just to get us started here in this Mishnah, that if someone is studying Torah, if someone is connected to Torah, the angel of death will have no control over them. They will have life that cannot be taken away from them. They'll be so bound up with God via his Torah. They are untouchable. Of course, we know there's only one source of life. It's only God. And the verse tells us in chapter 4, verse number 4 of the book of Devarim, the book that we are currently studying, that if we cleave to God, we will have life. Why? Because there's only one source of life, and that's only God. And thus, if you want life, you better have some sort of association with God. And thus the verse encourages us, cleave to God so that you will have life. Well, how do you cleave to God? Is it possible for us, physical, mortal, fragile, fallible, corporeal humans, to cleave to the Almighty, to the Ein Sof, to the infinite? So the commentaries tell us the Almighty created something which is the closest thing to him. That is the Torah. And although we cannot cling to God himself, because we're humans, we're physical, we have no association with God, we even have a hard time understanding God, we can't visualize God, we can't even utter the name that is most associated with God's essence. We don't even say that because we're so distant from it. But the Torah, that is adapted to our sensibilities. And we can't understand Torah. And that's the closest thing to him. And that's the thing most associated with God in existence. And therefore, by clinging to Torah, we cling to God. And if that's the source of life, by virtue of us clinging to Torah, we are clinging to the Almighty and thus becoming worthy of life. And again, I want to, at least to get us started, I want to understand the most basic level possible. Heartbeat, brain activity, being alive by everyone's definition. If you are connected to God, you will not die. Period. End of story. And there are several stories in the Talmud that illustrate this very dramatically. The Talmud tells us that King David, was very desirous to know when he will die. David's a prophet and comes to God, tell me when I'm going to die. Let me know when my point of expiration is. And God responds, listen, I have a rule. It's a decree. I cannot reveal when a person is going to die to any mortal, to any flesh and blood. No human will know the exact moment that they will die. But David was persistent. He says, Okay, so don't tell me when I'm going to die. Tell me what day of the week. So the Almighty relented. And God tells David, you're going to die on a Shabbos. So every day during the week, he drove like a maniac. No seatbelt, no nothing. David knew he's going to die on Shabbos, for sure. And he was very disappointed with that. He didn't want to die on a Shabbos. So he petitions God. He says, can we just push it off to Sunday? Would it be okay? Maybe a few more hours of life? And God says, no. Because when you die, your monarchy is going to be passed on to your son Solomon. And you cannot steal even a moment of his kingship, of his dominion, of his monarchy. You can't infringe and encroach upon Solomon's rule, even by a millisecond. Sorry. Sunday's not an option. So David says, okay, you know what? I'll forego a day. Let's die on Friday. I'm going to give up some of my monarchy for Solomon. And God says, no, I'm not willing to do that. Every second that you're alive, you're studying Torah, you're doing mitzvos. Yes, Solomon's going to build a temple, and Solomon's going to offer 1,000 sacrifices. But one day of you learning, of you studying my Torah, that is preferable than all those 1,000 sacrifices. So I'm not willing to give up for you to die on a Friday. From then on, the Talmud tells us, David knew that he is going to die on a Shabbos. And he set out to forestall that. So every Shabbos, once Shabbos began, he would begin studying Torah for the whole Shabbos. Wouldn't sleep, wouldn't do anything, just studying Torah. Based upon a certain principle, that if you are amidst the study of Torah, you are not accessible to the angel of death. That was his plan. And it worked until it was time for him to die. It's the appointed day, and the angel of death is given his marching orders, and he goes to pay David a visit. But alas, there's like a protective fence around David, and the angel's trying to get through. It can't. He's studying Torah. This is a problem. So the angel of death resorted to some unconventional tactics. He went to the backyard. David lived in the palace, and there was sprawling gardens. And the angel goes to the tree and starts shaking the trees, like creating like a tornado. And there's noise, and there's sounds, and we're going to get David's attention, and he'll stop studying for a little bit, and we'll snatch him. But of course, David was aware of that, or he had the presence of mind to not stop studying. But he was still curious to know what was happening. So as he's studying, he starts maneuvering himself towards the point where the noise was coming from. And he's heading down the steps towards the garden, and this crafty, clever, wily angel of death, he removes one of the steps. So David trips and tumbles, and in the mayhem, stops studying and is instantly snatched away by the angel of death, and he died. And there's an interesting epilogue to the story. David's body, it's Shabbos, and David's body's out in the gardens. What to do with the body on Shabbos? A human body, is muksa, meaning it's you cannot move it on Shabbos. And there was a concern that maybe some animals would come and start pecking away at the body of David. That would be a disgrace, obviously. And the Talmud actually has a very memorable line that states that a living dog is preferable to a dead lion. David was a lion, the king of Israel, but he's dead. And now the animals are coming, the vultures are swooping down. So what to do? Like, we can't leave the body there. Talmud says you gotta put something on top of the body, on top of the corpse, on top of the cadaver. If you put a loaf of bread or a child, an infant, upon them, then you could move the body into a safer location. Again, it's a law related to the laws of Shabbos, but that's the follow-up to that story. A living dog is better than a dead lion. This is one of the 3 instances in the Talmud where we have a similar story. Someone studying, and the angel of death wants them, and the only way to kill them, to have them expire, is by causing some sort of diversion, because otherwise they are untouchable. So perhaps we can suggest, maybe this is a basic way to interpret our Mishnah. Torah gives life by our definition of life. If you are studying and you are completely bound up to God in your studies, as David was, we can't guarantee that if someone's studying on a very superficial level, they'll have that same bond with life. But if someone is studying Torah on that level, they are inaccessible to the angel of death. And again, there are other stories to prove this point. Now, the problem with this is that this provides protection so long as you are studying. If you stop even for a moment, well, then you no longer have that bond of life with your studies or via your studies, and then you would be vulnerable. But that's perhaps one interpretation to what this Mishnah is referring to. It's literal life by our definition, so long as a person is studying with a degree of intensity or a requisite degree of intensity and commitment, they cannot be touched by the angel of death. There's perhaps another interpretation. What does it mean, life? Are all lives the same by the Torah's definition? Maybe, on some level. We don't evaluate whose life is worth more. In fact, the Talmud says that the reason why you cannot kill someone to save your life, my chazis didama didach sumek tvei. A little dash of Aramaic for y'all. Why do you think that your blood is redder than your fellow's blood? The Talmud says. So we don't make a hierarchy of the value of life. But on a qualitative level, we're told that someone could live a life and they could just, be really a very advanced animal on a spiritual level. If they're not accessing the parts of life that differentiate a human from an animal, how are they different than an animal? If they're not engaging with their intellect, if they're not accessing their soul, if they're not living on some sort of higher plane, well, on some level, how is our life any different than that of an animal? The verse tells us that there is a type of life known as living with emunah. V'tzadik be'emunaso yichya. A tzaddik lives with their emunah. And the Talmud tells us that this is one verse that encapsulates the whole Torah. There's living regular life, and there's living with emunah. And it's a different type of living. The Kuzari, the great medieval book of Jewish philosophy, he uses the very useful and ubiquitous framework of the different classes of creations. And he talks about the domem, which is the inanimate items, and then there's the tzomech, the things that sprout, like a tree or grass or flowers, fruits. And then there's the chai, the living things like animals. And then there's the medaber, the speaker, the human. But then there's a higher level, of the person who is bound with God, the human who is living on a much higher plane, on a much higher level of existence. Perhaps this is what our Mishnah is referring to. Torah gives life. Is a tree alive? On some level, right? You have a dead tree and then you use it for firewood. It doesn't grow, doesn't sprout. You have an animal, it's alive, but how alive is it when it is alive compared to a human? And even a human could be alive, but not tapping into the enormous potential and dynamism that is within reach for humanity. Not living on a higher plane, on a higher realm, on a higher dimension. What helps a person more than anything else to tap into that vast, effectively unlimited potential of human greatness and to live a life unlike basically everyone else? That is the Torah. So yes, it's not about lifespan. It's not about longevity, but there is a kind of life that you can only get if you tap into the vast powers included in the Almighty's Torah. I want to share some other ideas on how to interpret this Mishnah. Torah gives you life in this world and in the world to come. Our definition of the world to come, the Rambam tells us, it's life without death. So what does it even mean that you'll have life in the world to come? If you are in the world to come, by definition, you have life. Life in Olam Haba is self-understood, it's self-evident. So what does the Mishnah mean that those who study Torah, those who do Torah, they'll have life in this world and they'll have life in the world to come. If they are in the world to come, then by definition, they have life. So the Ben Yehoyada, he offers a novel interpretation into this Mishnah. When someone is alive, and suppose they're righteous and they're a great sage, but alas, they pass. Where are they now? That's a hard question to answer because, well, the body buried in the ground. The soul, we don't know where it is. It's somewhere in heaven. It's in the world to come. We know that there's lots of different places in the afterlife that a person's soul can go to. So maybe it's harder for us to answer where the soul is. We assume someone's righteous, they're in the world to come, or Olam Haba, or paradise. They're in a very good place. But we don't know for sure. The body, okay, we could find the grave. That's where the body is located. But if someone is righteous and they pass, do they have life in this world? You would imagine that the answer is no. Because they are no longer in this world in a way that has life. The bones, they're dead. The body, the flesh, maybe it's already been dissolved into the dust. So maybe there's some sort of remnant of their physical existence, but we wouldn't call that life, right? The Ben Yehoyada says something amazing. In many places, the Talmud tells us that if I were to say a piece of Torah in the name of one of the sages, their connection with that piece of Torah is enduring. We read the Talmud and we read the comment of Rashi. Rashi passed away almost 1,000 years ago. So is he alive in this world or is he dead in this world? So we would say, well, he's buried somewhere in Europe and Germany, and he's no longer alive in this world. But the Mishnah says otherwise. The Mishnah says, the Talmud says, that based upon a verse in Song of Songs, when someone's Torah teaching is taught, is recited, is recounted in this world, their lips are murmuring in the grave together with the person who's citing their Torah. So we open up a Talmud, and this happens a million times every day. Open the Talmud, and you read the Talmud, and you look at the inner margin, and you cite Rashi. Rashi passed away 1,000 years ago, almost, 1105, more than 900 years ago. But when I read the words of Rashi, the Talmud tells us, Rashi in the grave is murmuring together with me. Now, does that mean if we take a sonar and we look at the grave that we'll actually see movement? I don't know if that's what it means. But certainly what's implied in this Talmud is that even in this world, even in the grave, even in the physical domain, there is still a connection, there's still an association between a person and their Torah. So has Rashi passed away? By this definition, he's still alive in this world, not the world to come, not the soul, not Olam Haba, not in the afterlife, not in heaven, paradise. Here, he's still alive. And that's what perhaps the Mishnah is telling us. Torah gives life in this world. In this world, because a person is still alive via their Torah, their lips are murmuring in the grave. What about life in the next world? Isn't existence in the next world, by definition, life? Isn't the definition of life in the world to come as a permanent life, like the Rambam says, life without death? Says the Ben Yehoyada, even people that are fortunate, to be deserving, to be meritorious, to be worthy of life in the afterlife, it's not so simple. It's not seamless. There's a process. They got to go through the ringer to get there. And he tells us, someone could die, be worthy in general for the afterlife, but we find some flaws. The heavenly accounting finds some flaws. The soul's not pristine. There are some sins that need to be addressed. There's some sort of impurities, some unsettled scores. They may need to come back for round 2, round 3. They may need to be reincarnated, or they may need to spend some time in purgatory. They may need to have some sort of cleansing for the soul in order for it to be ready for Olam Haba. So they have life in the afterlife, but there's lots and lots of hiccups along the way before they get there. Is there a way to circumvent that? Is there a way to avoid all those hiccups to get to Olam Haba without delay? Says the Ben Yehoyada, that's one of the powers of Torah. It gives you life in the afterlife. You could get an expedited entry into heaven thanks to Torah. Why? Torah gives life in this world and in the world to come. In the world to come, you want to have life right away. You don't want to go through all the difficulties, the travails, the challenges, the unpleasantness of preparing for it. You want it promptly. You want to bypass all those typical steps. You want to be ushered into eternity. Torah. That is the secret. Torah gives life in this world and in the world to come. A fourth interpretation into the basic idea of this Mishnah. So we have one idea, and that is that literally, if you're studying Torah, you are impervious to the angel of death. We had a second idea, that there's living and there's a higher level of living. And what's the access point? What's the portal to the higher level of living in this world? It's Torah. We have the lips murmuring in the grave. You're alive even after your passing. And you have the expedited entry to heaven. There's another idea as to how to interpret the life-giving force of Torah as told in our Mishnah. In the Zohar and in many other Kabbalistic works, it's really hinted to in the Talmud as well, we discover that there is a perfect match between a person and Torah. Torah is the means by which a person can elevate themselves, can transform themselves, can make themselves worthy of eternity. And thus, the Torah is patterned after humanity, or maybe vice versa. Humanity is patterned after the Torah. But it's a perfect match. So much so that we read that if you were to kind of break down a person into different parts, you'll discover that there are 613 different parts to a person. Just as we know, there are 613 parts to the Torah. Every part has a lot of different parts to it. It's more like general categories. Not every cell in the human body is its own part. But there is a way to break down the human into 613 parts. And the Torah, of course, there are 630 mitzvos. And that's not a coincidence. Because if a person wants to elevate themselves, they could do it via the Torah. And every part of the Torah corresponds to a different part of the person. And by the way, this is true for the body and the soul, because the body has 613 parts, and so does the soul. The soul also has 613 parts. And the commentaries tell us, you do one mitzvah properly, you are elevating, you are purifying, you are making holy that corresponding part of yourself, of your body, and of your soul. And you are infusing that part of yourself with life and with eternity. If a person does all 613 mitzvos perfectly, they have life pulsating from every part of their body and of their soul. And when the two are separated, the soul goes up to heaven. Is it alive? Is it dynamic? Is it capable of life? Is it robust? Is it strong? Is it designed for continuity? Well, if they did the 613, they have a parallel, an avatar, if you will, of life, of themselves, that can endure forever. And they cite the famous verse in Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 18, the mitzvos, asher ya'aseh osam ha'adam v'chai bahem. If the person does the mitzvos, they will live through them. The mitzvos give us the ability to live for eternity. And they talk about how there's a difference between, if someone doesn't have a heart or a head or a liver, they're in big trouble. If someone's missing a pinky, well, it's not pleasant, doesn't look that great, but they could still live. That's the idea of the hierarchy of mitzvos. Every mitzvah gives life, but some of them give more life than others. And there are mitzvos that if someone were to, God forbid, not have them, then they have what's known as kares. They get cut off, meaning that they're not able to endure spiritually because they're missing one of the critical components of life. And of course, this raises a famous and obvious, really, question. The aforementioned Rashi never brought a sacrifice. How many mitzvahs relate to sacrifices? Hundreds. Is Rashi doomed to not have a full set of life in the afterlife? So the Kabbalists talk about how resurrection is a workaround to this problem. Because the resurrection in times of Messiah, that's when you can fulfill every mitzvah. And therefore you're able to fulfill the mitzvahs that you were not able to fulfill because you just had no access to such mitzvahs. Similarly, we're told in some of the Kabbalistic sources, which I know nothing about, of course, but I could read Hebrew, that every person will have to be reincarnated as a Kohen, as a Levite, as a man, as a woman, as a king, meaning every person will be given the ability on some level to fulfill all 630 mitzvahs. So to put that aside, the Talmud tells us there is a way for a person to fulfill all 630 mitzvahs, even absent the temple. Even if they're not a Kohen or a Levite or a king. You really can't be a king and a Kohen because a king is only from the tribe of Judah, and a Levite or a Kohen is only from the tribe of Levi. There's no way to live a lifetime that you have both. But there's a workaround. And there's a minimalist way to phrase this, and then there's a maximalist way to phrase this. The minimalist way is found in the Talmud. The Talmud tells us, if you study the laws of a carbon ola sacrifice, an elevation sacrifice, in heaven, you are given the credit as if you have brought an ola sacrifice. If you study the laws of the mincha, of the meal offering, it's considered on the spiritual realm that you have brought the mincha. And thus, some mitzvahs we can fulfill with our body. We could literally fulfill. And some we can only fulfill on the spiritual realm via studying Torah that's associated with that particular limb, organ, sinew, element of the body and the soul. And thus, this is again the minimalist idea. Torah gives life to the body, to the soul. Because when you study Torah, it's the way that you can plug all those gaps that you are missing with all those mitzvahs that you absolutely need if you want eternal life. You want your body to be alive? You want your soul to be alive? You want to be alive in this world and in the world to come? What gives life? 613 corresponding to 613. You study Torah, you gain life in the particular part of Torah that is associated with that element, with that part of the body. But there's a more maximalist way to frame this. Torah study in general, it's a mitzvah, but it's not like any other mitzvah. It's not associated with one particular limb or organ. Torah study is the panacea. It is the multivitamin. It gives life not just to one particular bone, limb, organ, physical, spiritual, sinew. It gives life to all aspects of a person. In our Mishnah, we have 9 verses. The second verse, again, it's all from Proverbs. L'chol b'saro marpei. Torah, for all of your flesh, for all the parts of your body and your soul, for all 613, it gives healing, it gives life. It sustains all aspects of a person. The Mishnah tells us, Talmud Torah kineged kulam. The study of Torah is equal to all the mitzvos. This is why perhaps if someone is studying Torah, they're actually absolved from all other mitzvos. Because if you think about a mitzvah as a pursuit of life, well, every mitzvah is pursuit of one element of life. Torah study, it's universal life. And therefore, it would be unwise for a person to forego Torah study in order to do even another mitzvah. But this is perhaps another way to understand what the Mishnah is telling us. Torah is great because it gives life in this world and in the world to come, to the body and to the soul. What gives life, eternal life, to a person? Of course, the mitzvos. But Torah is great because it gives life across the board to all parts of a person. L'chol b'sar marpeh, to all of a person's flesh, it provides healing. And thus it is very, very cherished and great if we want life. This is the way. Another idea. We are approaching the high holidays. It's around the corner. And what do we ask for more than anything else? We want to live. Zachrenu l'chaim, remember us for life. Our King who is desirous of life, inscribe us in the book of life. A life that is dedicated towards you. At the pinnacle of the prayers, we talk about how the books are open. And who's going to live and who's going to die is determined on this day. And the Talmud tells us that the righteous are inscribed to life right away. On Rosh Hashanah. They don't sit around and wait till Yom Kippur. And the wicked, they are inscribed to death right away. On Rosh Hashanah. And thus you would imagine that there would be an unexplained epidemic of death. Bolts of lightning flashing and nuking all the wicked every Rosh Hashanah. That's what the Talmud says. You don't wait around for Yom Kippur. That's for everyone who's in the middle. Someone who's wicked, right away they die. That's explicit in the Talmud. But of course, the problem is that it's just by our observation, it's just not true. And the commentators tell us it actually is true. Imagine if every September time, on the day that happens to coincide with Rosh Hashanah, in early afternoon-ish, mid-morning, it's time of judgment. All those who walk this planet are judged. And instantly, across the board, 8 million people die. Or, I don't know, 1 billion people die. Imagine that would happen. And someone looks at the calendar, it's Rosh Hashanah today. Of course, that's why they died. They're wicked. What would the next day be like? You read the paper. Problem is, there's no one to write the paper. Okay, I take that back. Okay, there's some decent journalists. You see in front of your eyes the judgment of God. The next day, all of us come to prayer on time. And we're very careful with everything that we do. Because we have been given a palpable, undeniable vision, window of the Almighty's truth. So our free will is over. So if the wicked were to die right away, literally by our way of measuring it, none of us who hopefully would survive, none of us would have any more free will. So they're dead. Not a question. But they're kept alive on a surface level for the sake of the free will of the righteous. What does it mean to be alive as a human? Not as a tree, not as a bush, not as a puppy. What does it mean to be alive? It means that you have the ability to elevate yourself, to transform yourself, and to elevate everything around you. You have the ability to bring the world towards its perfection. You can alter the trajectory of the entire universe. That's man. That's Adam. And that's the goal of creation. And that's life. But you look around, there's a lot more things than just humanity. There's trees and there's animals and there's galaxies and there's celestial beings, clouds, water, bricks, lots of things going on over here. The goal of creation is humanity. Everything else, that's the arena. That's the place where humanity must exercise humanity's free will. Is the goal of creation fulfilled with animals? No, it's only humans. So why are animals there? Well, they're there to facilitate the world in which free will can be exercised. Is the goal of creation rocks and mountains? No. So why are they there? Well, they're part of the furniture. They're on the set of life. They're the environment in which free will can be exercised. Oh, why are there angels? For the same reason. Angels are more lofty than us spiritually, but they're also there to facilitate the arena in which we get to live life. And there are some humans that even though they're human, and even though they have the capacity of being alive by this definition, and they appear alive, and they have a heartbeat, and there is brain activity, but the scope of their potential impact in the direction of humanity, their actual life by the definition of life being the goal of creation, it's very, very limited. They are effectively dead. They're not a player in the arena. So why are they alive? They're the environment in which free will is supposed to be exercised by others. And that's what we're praying for on the high holidays. Give us life. What do we mean by life? Not just walking and breathing and talking and munching on food and being a bean counter and a paper pusher. We mean life as in you have the ability and the mandate to bring the entire world towards perfection and to forge a relationship, an eternal relationship with your Creator, and to have your influence ripple throughout the whole world, throughout the whole universe. You're effectively Adam and Eve. That's life. And I would argue the vast majority of humanity, what we call humanity, Homo sapiens, are not alive by this definition. They haven't made it. Rosh Hashanah came. They're not a player. They're not interested in this. Okay, you're not interested. You're dead. Okay, but you're not dead. You are dead. You're kept alive because you're the arena. On the level of free will, you make very little impact in the trajectory of the world. Now, this is kind of scary. None of us want to be NPCs, non-player characters. And we'll assume that we're not, of course. Of course. But there's something consoling about it. What if someone was condemned to die, kept alive for the free will of others? They're part of the furniture. They're the extra. Someone who's dead can be resurrected. The Talmud tells us, on Rosh Hashanah, Sifrei Chaim v'Sifrei Mesim, the books of the living and the books of the dead are open. Who's being judged? Those who are alive and those who are dead. Well, if someone's dead, how could they be judged? It means that they are dead by this definition, but maybe they could be brought back to life. Maybe someone who was outside of the purpose of creation, they're dead by this definition. They're part of the environment. They're indistinguishable from the rocks and the trees and the angels and the galaxies and so on in determining the direction of humanity and of the world. Maybe they're dead, but they can come back alive. The books of the dead are open before God and Rosh Hashanah as well. Someone who is functionally dead, effectively dead, can be resurrected. We pray for his resurrection every day. 3 times a day. We say, Atah Dibar, you are mighty forever, O God. And then we say, Mechaye Mesim, you give life to those who are dead. And we mentioned it 5 times in this blessing, the second blessing of the Amidah. Mechakel chaim b'chesed. You perpetuate life with kindness. Mechayei mesim. You give life to the dead. You revive the dead. And we say it again. And we say it again. We say it 5 times. Resurrection we mentioned 5 times in every Amidah prayer. And only once do we talk about a future resurrection. You will in the future revive the dead. In 4 instances, we describe God as currently reviving the dead. Only once we talk about him in the future reviving the dead. Even now, there is resurrection. Even now, there are those who are dead who could be brought back to life. There are NPCs who could be brought into the arena to actually be a player. We want life. Not just the definition of life of there is some sort of brain activity and your heart is beating and you will feel hungry if you have no sustenance, time to eat some food, and you could click your remote to put on the game and you could laugh at the jokes and you could scan the newspaper and you could type your emails, but have no impact on the agenda of Adam. No impact on the goal of existence, not actually be alive by this definition. That would be unfortunate. We want life. What gives life in this world? Torah gives life. Torah expands the scope of life that a person has. How many people are alive? I always think about this. We know that the purpose of the world could have been fulfilled with one person, with 2 people, let's say, Adam and Eve. That's it. Are there billions of people alive by that definition today? My bet is no. And I don't think it's even millions. So how many people are alive by this definition? It's got to be more than dozens, I think. Hundreds? Thousands? Tens of thousands? Hundreds of thousands? I don't know, but there's a lot fewer people that are alive by this definition than the amount of Homo sapiens that are currently gracing this planet. You want to be a player? You want to actually have a say? Some people may say, no, no, too much for me. But if you want that, you want life, what gives it to you more than anything else? Torah makes you a player. Now, it is interesting. If you look at the Mishnah, it's one of those little nuances that we may miss. Gdola Torah. Torah is great. Shehinos and Eschayim, it gives life. Le'oseha, to those who do it. Ba'olam hazeh, in this world and the world to come. We think of Torah as something that we study, not something that we do. Shouldn't the Mishnah have said, Gdola Torah, Torah is great, Shehinos and Eschayim, it gives life. Lilomdeha, to those who study it. Why does it say le'oseha, those who do it? It's a bit of an unusual way to frame it. So maybe on a basic level, this tells us that we can't just simply study Torah to have the benefits, the life-giving benefits that it contains. We need to do it on a basic level. That means to, of course, observe what it tells us to do. Not to just study it in abstract, in theory, to do it, to actually live it. But there's another idea I saw in one of the commentators, which is, I think, very powerful. It's something that we've mentioned in the past, but that's okay. We're at the end of the book now. We're at the end of chapter 6. We're nearing the end. We started in 2017, this effort, this project. The Talmud asks the question, we know that you have to give honor to a sage. Someone's a sage, they know a lot of Torah, they study a lot of Torah, they teach a lot of Torah. You have to accord them honor. You're supposed to stand up before them, supposed to respect them, speak to them in a very deferential way. What if they say, you know what, I forego it. It's fine. You treat me like a regular person. I don't need any honor. Are you allowed to indeed treat them like a regular person? Or must you accord them honor nonetheless? If it's God's honor, this person doesn't have the ability to forego God's honor. The Talmud rules, Kavodo machol. His honor is, he could forgive it. He could forego it. Why? Because it's not the Almighty's Torah. It's his. And they quote the verse, B'Torah Hashem cheftzo, and the Torah of God is his desire, u'b'Torah so, and in his Torah he shall study day and night. And the Talmud says, wait a minute, it starts off with the Torah of Hashem, and it ends off his Torah. When we start off with Torah, it's God's. But when we study it, we acquire it. It becomes ours. And that's why the sage who wants to forego his honor, he's allowed to do it. Why? Because it's his. And perhaps this is what the Mishnah is hinting to. When it doesn't call someone who studies Torah, or doesn't describe the person who receives life via Torah as someone who studies it, rather someone who does it, who makes it. When you study Torah with such a devotion and commitment, and you're so your whole life, you're willing to be diligent in your studies, and you acquire it, it's yours, it's like you've made it, then it gives you life. You're simply you're studying Torah. This is the Almighty's Torah. I'm going to study the Almighty's Torah. It's the Almighty's Torah. I want to study it. Of course, that's where you start off. But that's not enough to trigger life. It has to be someone who makes it. You have to make it, meaning you have to acquire it. You have to say, it's mine. You have to have a degree of connection with it. It's not just the Almighty's Torah you're studying it. It's yours when you acquire it. Then it gives you life. Now, all the commentators talk about, okay, this is a very nice idea in the Mishnah. Torah gives life. We learned about all the different ways that could potentially mean. What does it mean, life? And how does it give you life? And so on. But then it cites 9 verses. Shouldn't 1 or 2 be enough? Don't you think? 1 or 2 would be sufficient? So the commentators, they say, it's not just this element to life. It's that element to life. I saw it was a very, very long piece I read in the Maharal. He talks about there's 7 different levels of life. And that's why there are 7 verses in the Mishnah. My problem was that I read 9, so I don't know how he ended up with 7, but that's what he writes. The Maharal may be in a different version. Maybe the last 2 were included in the 7th one. I don't know. But he describes, and I don't want to go through this very long piece, and we're already sufficiently deep into this Mishnah, but I found it to be very interesting when I read it, where he describes each level of Torah will unlock a different level of life. And the first 3, he tells us, there are life in this world. And as a person connects more and more with Torah, they're upgrading their acquisition of life that Torah has for them. And it starts off with just a little dash of life. It's only in your flesh. And then it goes to your navel, like the verse says. The verse says that it'll be a cure for your navel. Very interesting thing to say. Your navel, not the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. Your belly button. Well, what does that mean? So he explains, well, that's the starting point, and everything flows from there. And the next level up, it's not just you'll be healthy and robust, but you'll have longevity, you'll be stable like a long-lasting tree. And then it talks about physical life. What about spiritual life? And that's the graceful wreath upon your head. Your head, of course, that's the seat of the soul. And grace, something which is intangible, it's more spiritual. And then it's a necklace on your throat. A person's throat is where they speak from. And that's the spiritual part of a person, because the definition of a person is a speaking being. And you're able to upgrade to have a taste of Olam Haba in this world and so on. Very, very long piece. I would recommend it to talk about the 7 different levels of life and how Torah gives us life on these 7 dimensions. But regardless, the overarching lesson of this Mishnah Torah is great. Our people have been obsessed with Torah for a very long time. And one of the reasons why is because it gives us life. And we offered 5 different interpretations as to what this even means. Now, they're all based upon very rigorous sources, very reputable sources. I think they're all true. They're not mutually exclusive. The Talmud tells us David was untouchable when he was studying Torah. You want life? I can guarantee you'll have life. You'll be untouchable by the angel of death. Stop for a moment, you're vulnerable. Okay. It doesn't carry over this form of life that the Torah gives in this world. It doesn't carry over if you stop for a second, you trip a little bit, you stumble, and you lose focus, well, then you're vulnerable. You could be snatched up. We talk about the higher level of living. There's the human who's the speaker, and then there's the superhuman, someone who's living with God, like the tzaddik who lives with their emunah, an angel walking amongst men. How do you acquire that level of life? Via Torah. We have the idea of the Ben Yoyada. Life in this world, your lips are murmuring the words of Torah in the grave. Life in Olam Haba, there's the fast lane. There's the accelerated entry to Olam Haba. You don't need to worry about reincarnation or purgatory. Torah spares you from that. You have life in the world to come. We don't want to be NPCs. We want to be players in the game. How do you do that? Via Torah. And we have the idea of Torah giving us life to all parts of our body. Every mitzvah corresponds to one part of the body of the soul. Torah is the multivitamin. It is the panacea. If we just had this Mishnah, we would be very persuaded to take a closer look, a second look at Torah. But certainly, if we read this Mishnah is a very ancient teaching. It's thousands of years old. This is what our people believed. This is what our people believe today. Torah gives us life. If we cleave to it, we're cleaving to the Almighty. May we all be so fortunate to study the Almighty's Torah and to hopefully be recipients of life, both in this world and in the world to come. My email address is Rabbi Wolbe@gmail.com. I always look forward to your questions, your comments, and your feedback.